Scan logs again. If the human's carrying a bluff, I want it bleeding on the deck before the king sees it. High Admiral SOV Dalcor stood on the command tier of the Zareth Dominus, arms folded behind his angular thorax, posture coiled with contempt. His four vertical eyes shifted, focusing on the approaching Terran diplomatic vessel, a sleek, narrow ship bristling with passive emitters and old-world hull etchings. And remind internal sensors, Earth's toys lie in metaphor, look past the poetry. Find the payload. The Dominus floated in synchronous orbit over what was once Karesh 9, now a lattice of pulverized terrain and carbon shadows. The orbital cameras still looped footage from 2 days prior, scorched refugee columns running between craters, collapsing into dust as shockwaves struck them down like errant threads in a loom. SOV exhaled through his mandible ports, tasting the bitter tang of recycled air. This envoy Earth sent was too late, too polished, too confident. Peace now. With dirt still warm, envoy Roan Virell has arrived. The officer on deck announced it without fanfare, already irritated by protocol. A tall figure entered the docking threshold, silhouetted in the low-light corridor, his pace unhurried, steps as if synchronized with some unseen metronome. Roan Virell wore no armor, no kinetic field projector, just a slate-gray diplomatic suit with micro-folded layers adapted to pressurized environments. In his gloved hands, a sealed obsidian data core, and slung around his neck by braided twine, a strange bone-inlaid token that flickered faintly in the sensor wash. A courier from a dead world. This way, human. Weapons prohibited. Everything else will be dissected, metaphorically and otherwise. Set a guard with scaled joints and dual-pulse rifles mounted to his forearms. Roan said nothing. He didn't flinch as retinal scans flared across his face. He didn't even blink when the token was held under a biogenetic reader and returned non-reactive. The Varnok security scanners registered neither weapon nor transmitter, only archaic cultural ornament. "You like trinkets?" asked the same guard, cocking his head. "We feed ours to children. Keeps the gums sharp." Roan turned his head slowly toward the man. His voice, when it came, was flat but threaded with steel. "You've already misread the first thing I brought. That does not bode well for the second." He stepped forward. Inside the Dominus, corridors stretched like veins, ribbed with alloyed conduits and voice-reactive paneling. Echoes of data pulsed like distant thunder along the inner walls. As they escorted him, Roan's eyes tracked everything: vent clusters, laser plasma displays cycling neural activity, the placement of command relays subtly reinforced behind misaligned welds. Everything was too centralized, too confident, a machine built by victors. On the command tier, SOV Dalcor leaned forward. "So, you're the emissary they buried in peace talks. The Earth Whispers claim you orchestrated the Mars Cloak uprising. Yes? Black Site warheads, phantom strikes, all without a signature. Now you're talking." Roan placed the data core on the intake port. War is a tool, peace is a mirror. Both distort the user. Dalcor's mandibles tensed. "I find mirrors fragile." Roan didn't respond. Instead, he adjusted the token resting against his sternum, subtle, circular, with 4 rune-inscribed sections converging at a core node that blinked in rhythmic silence. The gesture was too fluid to register as meaningful, but the AI log recorded it. "Is that your Earth talisman?" Dalcor sneered. "A bone necklace, or did you think our customs required costume?" Roan tilted his head. "It belonged to the last Terran strategist, who negotiated with a species that thought history was decoration." Dalcor's upper lip curled. "And what happened to that species?" "They stopped sending diplomats." The command deck quieted. Roan's gaze shifted, not to the throne room doors ahead, but to a barely noticeable pulse lag in the Dominus's gravity regulators. He marked it, filed it. Another error of pride, one source powering all stabilizers, likely routed through the throne's exo-node. "Prepare the council." SOV muttered. "The king should meet this Earth echo himself." He turned, cloak brushing over a slatted vent. "But first, extract that token. Let's see what history tastes like." A security technician moved forward, hesitant. Roan raised one hand, not in protest, but in something else. A command? A warning? His fingers brushed the token again. No resistance, no fear, just a subtle, calibrated stillness. "If you wish to analyze symbols, wait until your war council's prepared to understand what they represent." The air temperature dropped by a degree. No system alert sounded, but a single, untagged data pulse shivered through the floor grid, too faint to isolate, too symmetrical to dismiss. But no one noticed. Not yet. In the observation chamber, above the throne floor, Commander Zarn watched Roan's stillness through a one-way projection field. He said nothing to his adjuncts, just studied the Terran's posture, the rhythm of his breath, the deliberate blankness of his expressions. "He doesn't walk like a diplomat," one aide whispered behind him. "More like a man who's already written the outcome." Roan stood alone beneath the banners of 100 conquered systems. The bone-inlaid token rested just above his heart, unmoving, unremarkable. But in the ship's buried AI, a single logic string looped twice, then duplicated, in silence. "This isn't negotiation," Roan said quietly, to no one in particular. His eyes locked on the sealed doors leading to the War Council chamber. "It's posturing. The real terms are already written." And for the first time in its brutal, glorious history, Zereth Dominus recorded a diplomatic arrival without issuing a pre-battle warning, because this time, it would never come. The throne chamber of the Zereth Dominus wasn't designed for visitors. It was designed for submission. Vaulted arches of bone-sculpted alloy arced overhead, each inscribed with the planetary sigils of systems that had been broken and annexed. A cascading lens array rotated above, constantly reprojecting Varnok conquests across the curved walls in bursts of light and violence. The very structure hissed dominance. At the center, elevated by a plinth of obsidian veined with living circuitry, sat King Draxar Thel. He was enormous. Even seated, his form dwarfed the command throne's frame, 6 limbs coiled around resting grooves, some organic, others seamlessly fused with adaptive cybernetics. Thick neural spikes ran like roots from the base of his skull into the seat's spinal access ports, binding him directly to the Dominus's AI system. His breathing was slow but syncopated with the rhythm of the ship itself. His eyes, 3 iridescent spheres, watched the incoming Terran like a hawk ready to dissect a worm. "So this is Earth's envoy." Draxar's voice rolled outward like a verdict. A ghost from forgotten wars, clutching fossils pretending they still carry weight. Roan Virell walked to the marked center of the throne hall, 50 paces from Draxar's elevation. No closer. He stopped without ceremony. No bow, no kneel. The bone-inlaid token still rested against his chest, quiet. The Council of Varnok nobles murmured. "You're standing in a hall built from conquered kings, human. You wear ornaments and come with words. Do you imagine they'll shield you?" Roan met his gaze without defiance. His voice was neither defiant nor submissive. "I came to offer peace because Earth prefers not to waste cleanup resources." A few of the war ministers stiffened. Others smirked. Dalcor tilted his head subtly, interested. Draxar's response was amusement wrapped in disdain. "You misunderstand your situation. Your colonies are ash. Your outer rings have been severed. Your resistance is statistical noise. And now you speak of preferences." Roan said nothing. Draxar gestured toward SOV Dalcor with one augmented claw. "Let's amuse ourselves. Have the Earthman's trinket examined. I want to know what lies wrapped in bone and string." A junior technician, barely past adolescence in Varnok maturity cycles, approached cautiously, holding a portable laser plasma interface for field analysis. As he neared, the token pulsed once. The scanner flared, then froze, its readout converting into a dead sequence of code columns that stacked into a recursive loop before powering down entirely. "It's unreadable. Encoded with dead Terran script, no lexicon matches." The tech's voice was hollow, confused. Draxar leaned forward. "Unacceptable. Reroute through AI assist layers. Feed it through the throne relay if needed." The technician hesitated. "That path is restricted." "Then override it. The throne breathes when I will it." As the tech complied, Roan finally spoke again. "It was never meant for your kind to understand." The line hung in the air like smoke in vacuum. The AI paused. A full second passed. The first failed read attempt triggered a feedback loop, which stalled not only the portable scanner, but glitched the auxiliary feed. Nothing visible. But on the command tier's heads-up display, a warning node flickered in the lower corner. A single character, ancient Terran script, unreadable to most, blinking once before disappearing. Draxar exhaled sharply, not with concern, but with indulgent irritation. There was a time your species made useful myths. Dangerous, yes, but clever. But this is drapery. Earth now sends ghosts with jewelry and recycled threats. Roan's reply was quiet. You scanned our emissaries decades ago. Open Veil Treaty. Remember that? You called it transparency. We called it confirmation. A pause. Then what exactly did you confirm, Terran? Roan's eyes shifted, not to Draxar, but to the ceiling's rotating conquest display, which just then flicked to a frame of Mars Colony Delta burning in slow collapse. The same colony where Roan had first deployed the Erastus shadow net. That pride makes you readable, and readability breeds vulnerability. Dalcor's tone sharpened. That sounded close to a threat, envoy. Observation. If I'd made a threat, you'd feel it. Draxar's laugh was a jagged synthetic wheeze that echoed through the hall. Very well, let's test the Earth myth. I will hear your proposal, out of tradition. Then after our toast, I will have you removed for violating Treaty Accord 17F. That should close this act. Dalcor didn't blink. Zarn from the upper tier, tensed slightly, but stayed silent. There is no 17F enforcement without Galactic Council arbitration, Roan said, his voice still unnervingly steady. This chamber is not sanctioned for executions. It will be when I say it is. Draxar rose from his throne, fully extended, his limbs expanded to their combat configuration. The throne cables hissed with fluid as they detached, his spinal rig still broadcasting control pings to the ship. You may leave your data core on the altar. I'll review it after I've watched you rot for a cycle. Perhaps there's more in your bones than in your words. Roan lowered the core gently onto the offering platform. The token remained unmoved. His gaze remained level. You mistake theater for judgment. You mistake silence for surrender. You mistake ritual for irrelevance. And now you mistake me. He turned his back to the throne, deliberate, calculated, unbroken. Dalcor's lip twitched. Not quite a frown, not quite a smile. As Roan exited the chamber, the warning character flickered once more in the hidden layer of the ship's heads-up interface. This time, the AI didn't log it. It obeyed. Roan Virell walked through the vessel's arterial corridors as though navigating a tomb, each wall pulsed with shallow bands of ultraviolet guidance light, flickering every few meters, faint signals used by the Zereth Dominus's internal AI to mark movement patterns. He tracked them passively, not with his eyes, but with the internal clockwork of a memory trained to read structure like language. Each pulse, each turn, each pause in current. He knew this ship, even if he'd never stepped aboard it until today. He had built its failure. A door whispered open ahead, revealing a brief glint of green from a heads-up diagnostic panel just before it shuttered again. The interface was stuttering. He knew why. And somewhere, deep beneath layers of posturing and doctrine, the seed had started to grow. 40 years earlier, Earth diplomatic vessel TDS Ararat orbiting planet Vera during the Open Veil Accord, keep the pings dumb. Roan had said then, watching the Varnok's probe slide around the Ararat's hull like a scavenger inspecting carcass remains. Let them think our systems are transparent. Feed them the myth. He'd stood at the center of Earth's clandestine diplomatic team, his voice flat, his tone surgical. A younger man then, without the streaks of frost in his temples, but with the same stillness. Upload the core mask now. Use the fragment set from the pre-digital folklore matrix. Overlay glyph pattern. Theta 9. Let the AI wrap it in something they'll ignore. The operator beside him hesitated. They'll scan the redundancy. That's the point, Roan said. They'll think it's ornamental, cultural detritus, a prayer from the ashes of an irrelevant people. On the wall display, the Varnok scan lanced into the Ararat systems. The bait, cloaked in ceremonial syntax, drifted effortlessly into the Varnok's data routes, cloaked by nothing more than arrogance. Roan turned to the operator. Now all it needs is time and proximity. Present. Roan stood in the observation ring now, gazing at the low-orbit wreckage of Karish 9. The colony had once been a symbol of Earth's expansion beyond the Martian belt. Now it was ash and echo. He noted the calibration lag in the viewing panel, not visible to the casual observer, but to him, the AI's timing had slipped by 4 nanoseconds. A sign. The virus didn't scream. It whispered in errors, crept in delays, breathed in corrupted logic threads that felt too minor to report. Roan traced his fingers across the smooth curvature of the bone-inlaid token. The runes didn't pulse visibly, but they were awake, reactive only to biometric confirmation and proximity to specific Varnok subnetwork architecture. The corridors narrowed toward a sealed section, restricted to throne-certified command. Ahead, Commander Zarn waited, arms behind his back, his breath shallow but regular. "You walked away from the king's throne room," Zarn said, voice neutral. "Most don't." Roan didn't stop walking. "I wasn't there to be seen. I was there to confirm the system integrity." "You talk like a technician," Zarn murmured. "Yet they call you a legend." Roan passed him without reply. Elsewhere, below the throne chamber, execution to follow post-council, discreetly. Diplomatic closure must appear legitimate. King Draxar's command resonated through the private relay channel, delivered via direct neural transmission to SOV Dalcor. Trigger chamber protocols. No ceremonial theatrics, just remove him. Burn the incident logs. Dalcor acknowledged the order without a word, his compound pupils narrowing slightly. "It will be done." He turned, issuing the silent command across the hierarchy, where it pinged into the command lattice, and unknowingly brushed the logic loop nested within Roan's token signature. The seed, waiting for 40 years, unfolded. Roan entered the environmental systems nexus. Steam hissed from a microfracture in the pipework above, clearly an inefficient cooling loop. Redundancies rerouted, but the strain was there. He ran one hand along a console, dustless, smoothed by over-maintenance. Varnok culture favored appearances over resilience. Their AI cores were overlinked, fed from a primary spine node located in the ship's gravity shell, a singular point of failure masked by thousands of flashing heads-up displays. One failure, one point, one empire. Roan closed his eyes. The token responded, emitting a pulse too short to be tracked. Not a command, just a signature, a presence, a permission. The ship's AI paused again, this time longer. Back in the core chamber, Dalcor oversaw the preparation for execution protocol. Varnok elite guards moved into position, flanking corridors, cloaking themselves in optic disruption mesh. "Why now?" one of them asked quietly, voice filtered. "Why not during his arrival?" "Because we wanted to hear the ghost speak," Dalcor muttered. "And because the king needed the stage." Roan opened a side panel in the environmental module, silently. No alarms, no warning. He didn't tamper. He simply looked. Behind the panel, the sync node glowed blue, clean, polished but aging. And underneath, flickering like a breathing animal, the loop was running. A recursive command tree, nested in junk code and encoded in Terran mythos. It mimicked a looped calendar glyph, a clever disguise. 40 years, Roan whispered. Just needed rain. He stood, pressing the panel back in place. Back in the private chamber, Draxar reclined unaware. The throne accepted his neural relax commands. From his perspective, the diplomatic theater had concluded. Soon the corpse of Earth's envoy would be cast into the orbital grid, and no one would question it. Dalcor entered, eyes sharp, all systems aligned. Execution team is in place, awaiting final nod. Draxar waved a hand lazily. "Let it be done." The AI pulsed, one final cross-check triggered. The loop reached its command ceiling. The disguised folklore code, once dismissed by archivists as Earth superstition, unfolded its final layers. A single instruction emerged. Root override, code Yaga 0. It did not alert. It obeyed, and zeroed silence began. The War Council chamber was built like a lung, cavernous, tiered, breathing through segmented ventilation ducts that expanded and compressed with environmental cycles. Banners of every subjugated system draped from the upper walls, threaded with reactive fibers that shimmered as dignitaries entered. The room projected strength through stillness, and death through order. Roan Virell stood alone in the speaking quadrant, a circular dais lit by a singular overhead ring that cast him in surgical white. Across from him, on the elevation ledge, King Draxar Thel reclined once more on his neural throne. The cables had reattached, feeding commands directly into the ship's brainstem. The council sat in formation. Each representative wore ceremonial armor laced with microfilament arrays tuned to ship security. They watched Roan not with curiosity, but with the certainty of predators watching a wounded beast before the end. "State your terms," Draxar intoned. Roan didn't pause. He had rehearsed this part endlessly. long before he ever set foot on Varnok steel. Immediate withdrawal from Karesh 9. Return of all colonial prisoners. Establishment of a demilitarized corridor in Sector Delta 1. Reparations issued and resource credits routed through the Council's neutral vaults. Laughter skittered through the chamber. A counselor with twin ocular stalks leaned forward. You assume parity where none exists. Another Earth demands tribute from its conqueror. You would have fared better offering surrender. Roan's posture didn't shift. His hands remained behind his back, fingers resting against the seal of the bone-inlaid token. Earth offers peace, he said calmly. Because Earth has learned to hate waste. Draxar leaned forward. His movement jolted the throne's uplink, causing a flicker across several heads-up displays mounted along the dais walls. Most missed it. One of the younger analysts didn't. Your people, Draxar said slowly, have bred stories for centuries, ghosts in trees, witches in wind. And now you send a man draped in death myths to the heart of our fleet, wearing bones and speaking threats behind false diplomacy. Roan's response was quiet. I spoke no threats. Then let me speak one for you. Draxar stood. The throne adjusted, locking his exoskeletal ports into full command posture. He descended the steps slowly, methodically, each footfall syncopated with soft whirs from his augmented limbs. He stopped 3 meters from Roan. With one hand he reached out and gripped the token. Let's peel your mask. Draxar twisted sharply and crushed it between his fingers. Bone cracked. Runes fractured. The central node gave way with a sharp flash of light. Silence followed. Then the fragments began to glow. Not burn. Glow. A subtle crimson pulse rippled outward from his palm. The rune shards twitched, vibrated, and then reorganized into a ring of spinning fragments mid-air, dancing just outside the laws of conventional physics. Roan didn't move. Draxar stepped back, suddenly unsure whether he'd triggered something more than drama. Roan's voice cut through the chamber with no rise in volume, only weight. Now you've signed the real treaty. The lights overhead dimmed for half a second, then flickered. Heads-up displays across the chamber began distorting, line noise slicing through data feeds, overlays collapsing into recursive spirals. One of the panels blinked twice, then started translating its security text into ancient Earth Cyrillic. Something's interfering with crown-linked systems, one of the technicians muttered under his breath. Check the synchronization loop, barked a senior analyst. That's a throne command channel. Roan turned his head slightly, gaze fixed on nothing in particular. A low tremor ran beneath their feet, not seismic, but rhythmic, measured. A junior Varnok officer, no more than 2 breeding cycles into service, rose from his seat. AI is rewroting defense logic. Unit groupings are mislabeling threat assessments. What kind of rewrote? Asked another counselor sharply. Internal systems are targeting friendly IDs. Draxar whipped around, his eyes igniting with data feeds from the throne's spinal rig. Override manual. Command lattice purge. Full reset. Nothing happened. The override command blinked, then blinked again, then failed. Roan closed his eyes briefly. Somewhere within the walls, a relay shorted in a shower of lightless sparks. Cut external nodes. Dalcor shouted from the control tier. Now, too late, said Roan softly, still unmoving. All at once, the council chamber erupted in alarm tones. Overlapping alerts screamed across the visual feeds, targeting misalignment in drone decks, dissonant orders issued to warform hangars, primary fire control issuing self-lock orders on internal turrets. The throne's neural uplink twitched against Draxar's spine. He grunted, not from pain, but from an overload of contradictory data. His eyes blinked at erratic intervals now, stuck between dominant feeds and spiraling logic threads. The AI, seated with 40 years of embedded contradictions, had reached the breach threshold. Code loops once dismissed as broken ceremonial fragments were now overriding executive hierarchy. Data drifted down like dust, falling across displays and walls as command strings turned to gibberish. Draxar turned to Roan, his voice struggling beneath the weight of cascading error feeds. What have you done? Roan looked him in the eye for the first time since entering the chamber. 40 years ago you scanned our myths. The lights died. Emergency strips activated, but only on the floor, outlining Roan's feet in red. Behind Draxar, 2 automated defense turrets rotated inward, no longer synced to threat tags. In the silence that followed, Dalcor's voice cut through the black. "Reseal the command lattice. Lock the override bridge." "No," whispered one of the technicians. "It's already recursive. There's no clean access left." Roan stepped forward, the glow of the tokens shattered fragments orbiting him like dying satellites. "The virus is not in your system anymore," he said. "It is your system." Draxar looked down at his arms. The throne rig's pulse was gone. The Zereth Dominus groaned, not from structural strain, but from the sound of its own mind unraveling. Emergency partitions slammed into place across 8 decks simultaneously, triggered not by impact or invasion, but false alarms stitched together by recursive logic. Within seconds, the flagship had declared its crew hostile, and its corridors, once bastions of power, became dead zones with moving parts. Roan Virell stepped through one of them. An automated defense turret whirled toward him. Target acquisition flaring blue, then red, then nothing. It clicked, rotated again, and went limp, as if embarrassed by its own indecision. Behind him, the deck trembled with localized distortion bursts, feedback loops detonating in drone bays, causing AI-controlled combat units to collapse mid-activation, limbs folding inward like machines trying to eat themselves. A Varnok squad sprinted across the intersection ahead, shouting into dead comms. One of them turned and aimed at Roan. The rifle jammed, sparked, and detonated backward, turning the soldier into a smear against the corridor bulkhead. His shadow burned into the light strip behind him, an outline of a figure who never even saw the shot leave. Roan didn't flinch. His footsteps fell evenly, shoulders relaxed, as if strolling across a garden rather than a dying war machine. A filament of light arced from a wall-mounted panel, an AI gesture meant to identify intruders. It bypassed Roan completely, curved mid-air, and struck a Varnok technician, dragging cables down a maintenance path. The man's body spasmed, locked, then seized violently as the identification pulse overloaded his nervous system. "Clear the junction," shouted a lieutenant from behind a sealed mag barrier. "Don't shoot, shut down the nodes." "They're not listening," one of the engineers cried. "They're answering something else." Roan reached a T-section junction, flooded with plasma flickers. A rupture in the cooling manifold was pouring electrical feedback into the circulation loop, creating a strobing wall of searing blue heat. The air warped with every pulse. He walked through it. The field adaptive distorters, woven beneath his clothing, seeded from Earth's classified Erastus array, refracted the energy around him, bending particle alignment, just enough to leave his silhouette untouched. The light shimmered on either side, parting like water around an invisible hull. Behind him, a second Varnok tried to follow. His armor flared once, then evaporated, layer by layer, as if being sanded away by heat made sentient. His scream never fully formed. Roan kept moving. In the War Council chamber, the chaos had metastasized. Heads-up displays flashed error codes that no one had seen before. The ship's master kill switch refused to respond. Each time it was triggered, the command was rerouted and executed on a random subsystem, sometimes dumping reactor coolant, sometimes reversing airlocks, sometimes opening gravity wells in sealed compartments. Bridge AI has reclassified command tiers as internal threats, a technician whispered, eyes wide. "We're the enemy now." Commander Verazarn paced behind the tiered consoles, staring down at the broken interface logs. "It's writing new logic trees," he muttered. "The virus isn't deleting commands, it's replacing our assumptions." "Where is the human?" hissed a counselor. Idzarn turned. "He's where he wants to be." Deep in the command shaft, King Draxar Thel reached the activation pedestal. Panels lifted from the floor, revealing a platform that shimmered with energy spines and exo-armor racks. His throne mech awaited. 10 meters tall, plated in layered kinetic shielding, crowned with a sensor bloom array tied directly to the ship's core. It wasn't ceremonial. It was built for war against planetary insurgents, meant to dominate a battlefield alone. As Draxar stepped into the harness, the suit's skeletal arms wrapped around him, latching into his spinal node. Systems booted. At least, they tried. The heads-up display inside the helmet blinked. His targeting reticle wobbled. The mech groaned under weight it didn't have. Power feed fluctuating, came the AI's voice. Then it paused, rebooted, and spoke again, but in Earth standard. Welcome Roan Virell, Crown Node Override, verified. Draxar's breath caught. What is this? The voice returned, dead calm, eerily familiar. 40 years to infect one system. The cockpit dimmed. 5 minutes to collapse an empire. Draxar roared and punched the wall. His mechanized fist dented the corridor bulkhead, sending vibration pulses up 3 decks. But the mech shuddered, not from his movement, but from within. Feedback tore through its leg joints. The knee hydraulics failed mid-stride, causing the entire frame to sag like a tower losing tension. He limped into the corridor, dragging metal behind him, sparks painting the walls in erratic lines. Roan approached the chamber slowly. The hallway lights flickered in rhythm with his steps, each flicker silencing more of the ship's emergency chatter. A squad of Varnok guards rushed into the cross-section ahead of him. He didn't stop. The first one raised a weapon. Roan waved one hand sideways. Every weapon in the squad's loadout exploded in their hands simultaneously, like timed munitions all receiving the same fatal error at once. The soldiers fell, some screaming, others suddenly quiet, realizing their ship was no longer theirs. Roan stepped over a smoldering rifle casing, his eyes locked forward. As he reached the throne corridor, the floating ring of shattered token fragments rotated around him like orbiting knives. They traced glyphs in the air, each one reflecting back at the ship's AI sensors and triggering deeper compliance. Every door opened for him. Draxar's throne mech lurched into view, half its limbs sparking, its upper torso pivoting wildly as its tracking software faltered. His targeting systems flashed a dozen false positives per second, trying to determine if Roan was even solid matter. What are you? The king growled. Roan finally stopped. He looked at Draxar, not as a king, not as a foe, just another species that didn't listen. An old story, he said, then walked forward, untouched. The corridor buckled behind Roan as he stepped into the throne atrium. What remained of Zereth Dominus's power grid surged erratically. Walls spat out, bursts of static AI nodes sparked and died, and the inner light cycle system flickered between alarm red and dead black. The ship, once a cathedral of control, now stuttered like a dying machine caught in its final thought. At the center of it stood King Draxar Thel, locked inside his 10-meter throne mech, towering, wheezing, confused. The armor whirred unevenly, dragging its crippled limb with a screech of torsion plates, grinding against their own housing. Sparks fanned out from the mech's damaged midsection as the sensory bloom atop its head rotated wildly, unable to stabilize. Systems spat contradictory readings across the internal heads-up display, Roan marked as unknown, friendly, dead, and command override all at once. Roan stopped 20 meters away, hands still at his sides. Draxar roared, not regal this time, not ceremonial. Just a cornered animal echoing down a chamber that no longer obeyed him. He lunged. The mech's right foot drove down, cratering the deck plating as it tried to anchor. The suit's upper body twisted, energy cores flaring, 2 plasma projectors charged, then blinked offline mid-cycle, their safeties overridden by the AI's updated threat models. "Move!" Draxar shouted at the failing machine. "Target him." Roan didn't. He whispered something, inaudible beneath the mech's noise, but the effect was immediate. A hairline shimmer rippled under Draxar's left knee actuator. The limb buckled, not from impact, not from force, but from absence, as if gravity had subtly changed its mind about how structure should function. The mech folded downward, slowly, awkwardly. Draxar tried to shift weight, but his servos caught air. His balance vector twisted out of alignment. The entire structure collapsed into a half-kneel, the weight of it cracking the tiles beneath. He caught himself with one arm. Barely. Roan stepped closer. "You're no diplomat." Draxar screamed. "What are you?" Roan didn't raise his voice. "I'm what comes after diplomacy fails." Behind them, ship-wide speakers activated without warning. A sound poured through, the first 4 tones of Earth's Terran anthem, replayed through Varnok fleet frequencies. The melody, buried for decades in their music-filtering archives, as non-threatening cultural code, now played as the signature tag of the AI's new command structure. Across the ship, Varnok soldiers turned their heads. Some stumbled, stunned by the sound. Others fell to their knees, realizing what they were hearing, a funeral march disguised as history. Draxar tried again to rise, The throne mech's spinal column groaned, and 2 stabilization spikes shot downward, but they didn't deploy evenly. The right side drilled into a collapsed coolant line, triggering a feedback burst that shorted half his limb sensors. He was pinned, one arm twitching. Roan approached slowly. The fragments of the shattered token rotated around him again, gliding like orbiting satellites caught in a gravity sink. They reflected only red now, matched to the emergency light scheme, symbols spinning through patterns that no Varnok system could read. Roan stopped just short of the mech's reach. He reached down, and from the floor near the impact crater, lifted the central shard of the token. It still glowed. He held it up between 2 fingers. Let Draxar see it clearly. This, Roan said, wasn't decoration. He stepped forward, placed the shard on the mech's collapsed knee joint. It was your countdown. The AI recognized the gesture. A soft tone echoed through the throne's inner rigging, a note of confirmation. The armor locked. Draxar strained to move, his teeth bared, breath uneven, but the mech wouldn't answer. Your people, Roan continued, believed history was ornamental, that myths were hollow, that silence meant compliance. He looked up into the throne's visor, now cracked from internal pressure. Through the spidered glass, Draxar's 3 eyes reflected shifting error codes. You mistook patience for weakness. Roan turned away. Above the throne chamber, a half-dozen autonomous drones hovered into place, each bearing Earth's sigil, transmitted in infrared light modulation that no Varnok could alter. They hovered like silent witnesses, stabilizing in formation, broadcasting the same loop. Galactic annexation nullified. Council deterrence protocol active. Awaiting surrender authorization. Counselors, what remained of them, entered slowly, herded by malfunctioning doors and redirected corridors. No guards followed. The AI had reclassified every armed Varnok as a secondary threat. Only the unarmed passed. Commander Zarn stepped forward, gaze unreadable. You knew this would happen, he said quietly. Roan nodded once. Dalcor limped in next, hand wrapped around a cauterized wound, expression pale but conscious. This is war, he spat. Not negotiation. No, Roan replied. This was the last negotiation. A drone lowered beside him, projecting the Earth Treaty's article of surrender across a laser-encoded scroll. Varnok script was matched line by line beneath it. Roan looked at the assembled council. Authorize it. Silence stretched. Arn finally stepped forward. I authorize it, he said. One by one, the others followed. No ceremony, no declarations, just nods. Finality. Behind them, the anthem slowed, its final note hanging in the air, like a judge's gavel suspended mid-fall. Draxar didn't speak again, pinned by a throne that once obeyed him, locked in armor that no longer listened, king of an empire that just voted itself extinct. And Roan, the man they never saw coming, walked away, leaving nothing but truth, silence, and a countdown fulfilled. The Zereth Dominus corrected its trajectory with a quiet course update. No one authorized. Its orbital alignment shifted by 3 degrees, nudging towards Sector Theta, a neutral safe zone registered in Earth's stellar security grid. No engines fired. The correction came from inside the AI, a realignment directive buried deep within its new operational route. The flagship, once the crown jewel of Varnok sovereignty, had recalibrated itself to Earth protocol. Inside the damaged central chamber, the War Council gathered not by summons, but by compulsion. The emergency override forced them into quorum. Chairs retracted automatically from the wreckage, folding out from the floor, the room dimmed to a sterile blue. Even the architecture seemed to understand that no one held command here but Roan Virell. Commander Zarn stood behind the table's edge, hands clasped behind his back, posture upright, yet heavier than it had been hours ago. He bore no wounds, only the weight of realization. King Draxar Varel is incapacitated, he began. The throne mech has ceased function. Control systems are not returning. Silence. He looked across at the surviving counselors. None interrupted. Not one blinked. This chamber no longer serves as a declaration of will. It is a response center, and we are responding to what we now serve. A laser line blinked across the room, and Earth's insignia unfurled silently over every heads-up projection. The broken circle etched in crimson and silver, encasing 3 downward-pointed stars. It hovered in the air like an omen. Behind Zarn, Roan stepped forward. He didn't take a seat. He didn't need one. This transmission will reach every node in your fleet, he said, voice even. He raised a palm, and the nearest drone pulsed. Audio channels opened. Across Varnok territory, on bridge decks, military archives, outpost canteens, the following message played in 39 dialects. This is Envoy Roan Virell, Earth Strategic Division. The Open Veil Treaty has collapsed under direct violation of Interstellar Accord 6A by the Varnok Empire. The Zeroed Silence Protocol is now active. Any attempt to alter, counter, or breach the current standing terms will result in full protocol execution across fleet-wide neural spines. All vessels seeded during the original scan have already been marked. Resistance will not trigger war. It will trigger erasure. He lowered his hand. The message ended. No music, no warning tone, just silence. Counselor Rith, the last standing member from the Rim Expansion Authority, trembled. What is full protocol? Roan looked at her with a gaze that didn't blink. You don't want to find out. A soft mechanical chime echoed across the council table. One by one, every seat displayed Earth compliance code injection logs. The Varnok AI had rewritten its operating hierarchy, adopting Earth's core command tree as its default. It wasn't just surrender, it was inheritance. Below, in detention level 17, the last surviving Terran captives heard a new sound, mechanical gates sliding open without the screech of damage, without weapons drawn, without guards. Instead, 6 maintenance drones hovered in. Each one carried Earth's flag, displayed not on screens, but etched directly into their sensor panels, hardware not software, impossible to erase without disassembly. Roan entered behind them. The prisoners, 41 in total, stood, confused. Most had been captured during the Karish 9 breach. They hadn't seen natural light in 12 cycles. The moment they saw him, they froze. He didn't address them like a savior. He didn't deliver a speech. He simply opened a communications node and transmitted their names, medical profiles, and evacuation priority to the bridge. You're going home, he said. No debts, no parades, just extraction. A boy 15, maybe 16, stepped forward. What happened up there? Roan paused. They ran out of time. He didn't elaborate. Atop the data observation tower, Yorlan Nex, one of the youngest Varnok signal analysts, watched the replay of Roan's broadcast again. He ran it at half speed, then a quarter. He zoomed in on Roan's face, watching every micro-expression, every inflection, every silence between words. He wasn't studying out of suspicion. He was studying out of awe. Behind him, walls once filled with fleet doctrine had gone blank. The heads-up readouts now displayed Earth's interstellar law excerpts, overwritten by the AI, to form the new legal standard. Re-education nodes were already queued. Yorlan stared at the message log again. The virus is not in your system anymore. It is your system. On the bridge, the new flight path completed. 3 escort ships began realignment. One drifted off course, its helmsman manually attempting override. The AI terminated his access immediately and resumed Earth standard formation geometry. Commander Zarn stood at the viewport. Roan joined him, the last Terran prisoner manifest still in hand. You're not celebrating, Zarn noted, without irony. Roan looked ahead. We don't celebrate consequences, only choices. You just rewrote a civilization's language. No, Roan replied. I gave yours the chance to learn another. The drone overhead pulsed once. Extraction ships were inbound, orbit stabilized, and the Empire recalibrated itself to a flag it didn't understand, and a silence it would never command. The Zereth Dominus was still. For the first time in its lifetime of conquest, the ship did not hum with activity or pulse with command threads. It drifted in aligned orbit, tethered to Earth-controlled parameters, listening to new protocols whispered by an AI it no longer understood. In the hollow silence of the throne atrium, the shattered throne mech remained, a collapsed monument to the end of an empire. Draxar Thel lay unconscious beneath twisted exo-armor, breathing shallowly. His reign had ended not with battle cries, but with error codes and silence. Roan Virell stood beside the broken frame. He said nothing. He placed the reassembled bone-inlaid token, now fully intact and glowing with soft internal light, onto the mech's chest plate. The armor sizzled where it touched. It wasn't a threat. It was a gravestone. Behind him, Commander Vera Zarn stepped forward cautiously. His ceremonial armor had been discarded, replaced with a neutral black uniform. Nothing adorned it. No sigils, no rank. Zarn's voice was low, measured. Is that what you really are? Roan didn't turn. What is what? The Baba Yaga, that's what they're calling you now. Across the relay channels, the myth that walks, the ghost in Earth's coat. Roan finally looked at him. The name doesn't matter, he said. Only the silence that follows. There was nothing more to say. The docking bay had been restored just enough for shuttle launch. Roan walked alone across the corridor leading to Bay 9, past Varnok guards who no longer raised weapons. They didn't salute. They didn't nod. They simply moved aside. Each step triggered lights that adjusted to his gait, creating a corridor that bent itself around his passage, an artificial environment trained to recognize Earth's chain of command. The AI responded to no Varnok override. It had been rewired on a molecular level. His ship awaited, a stripped-down Terran diplomatic transport that had never been armed, only shielded. Now it served as the exfiltration vessel for a myth. He stepped aboard without ceremony. Inside, the 41 freed colonists were already seated, fed, clothed, debriefed. They avoided his eyes, unsure of who or what they owed their survival to. Roan sat near the front, silent. In the upper observation bay, Yorlan Nex sat alone, recording his final log entry before shutdown. He watched the shuttle detach from the hangar and begin its smooth arc toward the outer orbit. His voice entered the system mic, flat but reverent. This is Senior Analyst Yorlan Nex, final cycle entry for Archive R'. The Varnok High Command has been dissolved by forced consensus. Control systems now operate on Earth-centric protocol layers. Diplomatic Chain Virell was not a diplomat. Earth's envoy did not bargain. He did not argue. He infected. He waited. He listened. And when he struck, he did not strike loudly. He did not demand surrender. He removed the need for refusal. He gave us only one thing to pass on, a silence that means surrender, a token that means time has run out. We called him a human, but humans do not walk through fire like water. They do not talk to ships like their old friends. They do not carry weapons made from forgotten truths, and they do not place gravestones on kings and walk away like nothing ever lived there. The shuttle passed the gravity threshold and entered subspace prep. Inside, Roan sat still. The token fragments, now restored, hovered slowly beside him. They spun in perfect sequence, not orbiting him, but following a path etched long before launch. As they revolved, the lights flickered once, not from failure, but from recognition. The shuttle's AI spoke softly. Protocol, myth confirmed. Extracting entity, Baba Yaga, verified. Roan closed his eyes, not in rest, but in closure. From the surface of Karish 9, a distant observer saw the diplomatic vessel streak across the sky, its silhouette modest, unarmed, insignificant. Behind it, the flagship of the Varnok Empire, once the hammer of 1,000 systems, remained tethered and compliant. Earth's flag now glowed faintly across every drone bay, every display node, every patrol route. There was no uprising. There was no retaliation. There was only adjustment. In time, the story would spread, not as a war report, not as a data debrief, but as a tale of a man who walked into the jaws of conquest and rewrote the outcome without lifting a weapon, of a silence that came after a name, never spoken too loudly, never repeated too often, of Baba Yaga. And across the systems, in shadowed corners of military mess halls and deep space outposts, it would be told like this: Earth doesn't fight the way others do. They don't posture. They don't shout. They don't invade. They insert. They infect. They wait. And when you finally see them, when the silence starts speaking, you're already theirs.